Then we're going to get off into it. We're going to get off into it, family. Give me just a second. All right. How y'all doing? How y'all doing today, man? Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for tuning in. How y'all doing? How y'all doing? There you go. There you go. All right. Okay. I'm reloaded. Hey, man. Listen. A good book in the hands of the right person can be a weapon of mass destruction, or it could be a weapon of mass production. It all depends on how you want to use it. Y'all see the title, family. Today we're going to be continuing this series that I'm working on called The Ancestors Speak. We are allowing the ancestors to speak. And today I have a real good one for you guys. So get your popcorn ready, get your coffee ready, get your snacks ready, get everything you're gonna need, because you're gonna want to stay glued to your seat, because I'm about to dig deep with this one, family. Grand rising to you too, Heather. Thanks for tapping in. Thanks for tapping in. I guarantee you're gonna like this one. We talking about the descendants of slave owners and the historical reliability of the slave narratives. Again, we're talking about the descendants of slave owners and the historical reliability of the slave narratives. Now, when we're going into a lot of this oral history that is known as the slave narratives today, obviously, anybody of African American descent, we are looking back at these ancient records as the records of our ancestors. And we understand from the historical reality of how America was formed, that our ancestors were enslaved on these shores. But have we ever stopped to take the time to think about, if we are the descendants of the enslaved, who are the descendants of the slave owners? They have to have some descendants out here. And is there a way where we can pinpoint any of those descendants? Now, we probably can't figure out all of them or everyone who is the descendant of a particular slave owner, but we can identify some. And we can use the slave narratives, or what I like to call in my own time, the oral histories of the ancestors. We can even use that material to identify some of the descendants of the slave owners today. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to take you guys through a list of sources. I'm going to take you through a list of the records, and I'm going to show you guys exactly how what they're calling the slave narratives are extremely historically relevant and reliable. And why I'm taking the time to do this is because in my research, I came around like several articles where they were attempting to discredit the slave narratives. And they were trying to make it seem as if based on the time period that these interviews were taken, and the fact that a lot of the interviewers were white and the people that they were interviewing were ex-slaves, then that dynamic between ex-slave and a white person means that we can't fully trust what the ex-slave was telling the interviewer, right? And I totally disregard that. I throw that notion out. I don't agree at all. Because think about it. Why is it okay to believe the story about what our ancestors went through? And why can we take that story from the people who actually enslaved our ancestors, but we can't take the word of our ancestors who were actually enslaved? Why is any history credible? Why is anybody's primary sources and anybody's primary sources credible if our ancestor stories aren't credible? So what I wanted to do on this first slide, I wanted to highlight one of these particular articles. And I'm going to show you just how disingenuous the author of this article, Rebecca Onion. I'm going to show you how disingenuous she was, and I'm going to prove to you that she intentionally, I don't know why, but she is intentionally misleading in this article, family, intentionally. And some of it may be that they want to discredit the oral histories or the slave narratives, because if we dig into them, we can do things like what I'm going to show you in a second. We can uncover some of the descendants of these slave owners because they left us a lot of information about the people that they belong to. So the title of this article that I read by Rebecca Onion is the greatest collection of slave narratives tainted by racism. In the 1930s, the federal government sent mostly white interviewers to learn about slavery from former slaves. Can we trust the stories they brought back? Look what she says. When Josephine Anderson, a formerly enslaved Floridian, was visited by a white government interviewer in the fall of 1937, she told him a ghost story. Anderson described to Jules Frost, a white man, who walked alongside her as she traveled the railroad tracks one morning. When I walked slow, he walked slow, and when I stopped, he stopped, never once looking round. The transcript of Anderson's interview, rendered in dialect, reads, "My feet make a noise on the cinders tween the rails, but he doing make might a noise." Anderson asked the man, who she declared to Frost to be a haunt or a ghost, to go away by saying, "Look at here, mister, I's just an old colored woman and I's knows my place, and I wished you wouldn't walk with me, counter what folks might say." The man went away as bidden. So she begins the article, hey, Grand Rising, Bigfoot, Grand Rising, thanks for tapping in, family. So look, so she begins the article by referencing one of the slave narratives out of Florida about one of the ancestors, may her name live on forever and may her memory never die, named Josephine Anderson. And in this particular slave narrative, the ex-enslaved woman is talking about, she's telling her a ghost story. And she's saying that one morning while she was walking along the tracks, a quote-unquote white man seemed to walk alongside her, but he didn't say anything, and his feet didn't even make a noise when they were hitting the ground. So she's telling this interviewer about this ghost story. Now watch how Rebecca Onion interprets this, because she's trying to say that these slave narratives aren't credible history, and we have to look at it as if the enslaved were just saying things that weren't true, or they weren't talking about their real experiences. And now watch how disingenuous she was being. This is her interpretation of that story. Why would Anderson tell a visiting researcher a ghost story? Remember that question that Rebecca Onion asked. Why would Anderson tell a visiting researcher a ghost story? Was the tale a simple bit of folklore passed on without motive? Or was it, as historian Catherine Stewart argues in her new book, Long Past Slavery, Representing Race in the Federal Writers Project, a way for Anderson to comment on race relations in Jim Crow Florida? So now we have this woman Rebecca Onion quoting Catherine Stewart in a manner in which is to discredit the slave narratives. She says, was it a means for a black interviewee to make an argument about the unwelcome presence of a white interviewer in her home, and to point out the danger she perceived in his presence, all while preserving a mask of civility and giving the interviewer what he asked for? While Federal Writer Project's interviews like Frost were engaged in writing down African-American ghost stories, Stewart writes, former slaves such as Josephine Anderson were conjuring up tales about power and racial identity. So what they're trying to say is, when she told that ghost story, she wasn't really telling a ghost story. She never experienced that, and she made up that ghost story on the spot. And why did she make it up? Because she was trying to make a mythological tale to nicely say that she didn't want this white man in her home interviewing her, right? So they want to put into the reader's mind that when you read the slave narratives, you have black people making up stories about what they experienced during slavery to talk about race relations in America. Family, they were not making up mythological stories and folklore to explain racial relations in the 1930s. And I'm going to prove it to you. Now, check this out. You see, she's talking about Josephine Anderson from the Florida slave narrative. Well, you guys know me. I'm the real bookworm. All I do is read, family. That's all I do. In my spare, I take care of my family. I work, of course, but in my spare time, all I do is read. And when I read this, my mind clicked to. I say, wait a minute. I read that particular slave narrative before. I know exactly who Josephine Anderson is. You can't get me. You can't get me. Now, remember, check this out, family. Check this out. Before I go, I'm finna show you guys the slave narrative of Josephine Anderson, and I'm finna debunk that it was just some mythological story to explain race relations. Nonsense. But look, remember this question. Why would Anderson tell a visiting researcher a ghost story? It seems like a valid question to somebody that has never read the slave narratives. But family, listen to me. What the slave narratives are is federal workers went out to ex-slaves to literally interview them about their time in slavery. Now, whenever you conduct an interview, what do, family? You ask them questions. When you read through the slave narratives, you see all of them talk about some of the similar things. They're going to talk about where they were born, if they remember their parents. They're going to talk about what plantation they were on. They're going to talk about what they ate, what jobs they done, if they were ever punished. And they're going to talk about haunts or ghosts or spirits or conjuring. Why? Because the questionnaire that the federal workers went out with specifically asked them if they had any ghost stories, or if they had any stories about spirits, or if they had any stories about conjuring and haunts. So when the lady that wrote that article say, oh, why would she just tell a story about a ghost story? Because, family, the interviewer asked her the question. And so when you look into the Josephine Anderson slave narrative account, what she recorded about her walking along the railroad tracks is not the only ghost story that she told. Why? Because she was asked about ghost stories. So she told all of the ghost stories that she could remember. Exposure number one. Look, check this out, family. Folk stuff, Florida, haunts. Josephine Anderson, Tampa, Florida, October, I can't really tell what date that is, 1937, right? So October 1937, we're talking about Josephine Anderson, and we're talking about haunts. This is the exact same lady, Josephine Anderson, that article was talking about. So we don't have to take that lady's word on it. We can go straight to the source. You see what I'm saying? Watch this. I'm gonna show y'all the story that she was talking about in just a second. Just a second. Look. Okay, right here in this second paragraph, she starts talking about the haunts. She say, now it's kind of hard to see and it's going to be kind of hard to read, but I'll read it to you. She say, you see, brooms keeps haunts away. When mean folks dies, the old devil sometimes don't want them down there in the bad place, so he makes witches out of them and sends them back. One thing, hold on. One thing about witches, they got to count everything before they can get across it. You put a broom across your door at night, and old witches got to count every straw in that broom before she can come in. So she's telling them some of the superstitions about haunts and ghosts that they had on the slave plantation. And one of the things was, before a witch or a haunt or a ghost could come into your house, they had to count everything in front of them. So what some of the ancestors used to do, they would put a broom down in front of the door. So the witch, the ghost, the haunt would have to count every one of the straws in the broom before they could enter. Right? And why I'm saying this is I'm showing you guys that she's already talking about haunts and ghosts before she get to the ghost story that they isolated in the article. So when they asked the fallacious question, why would she tell the interviewer about ghosts? It's because that's what she was being interviewed about. She was not like they tried to say that she made up that other ghost story in order to have just some mythological concept about race relations in the 1930s. Well, what do they have to say about this counting everything, all the straws on the broom? Is that some mythological thing that this lady is just making up to highlight or discuss race relations in the 1930s? Or is she telling you accurate history about what they believed and what they were doing on the plantations? Look, she goes on to say some folks can just nearly see haunts better than others. Somebody, my gal can. I reckon that's because she been born with a veil, of something. Something would be over some babies' faces when they is born. Folks born with the veil can see spirits and tell what's going to happen for it come true. So you see, she's already in the mode of talking about ghosts. She's talking about spirits. She's talking about superstition. So that interviewer was very disingenuous when she said, why would she tell the interviewer a ghost story? I guarantee you it wasn't to talk about race relations. Now let's go to exactly the story that she's talking about, just to prove to you that we're looking at what she said. Now, remember, hold on. Remember, she says, Anderson described to Jules Frost a white man who walked alongside her as she traversed the railroad tracks one morning. When I walked slow, he walked slow, and when I stopped, he stopped, never once looking round. Let me prove to you that this is the actual slave narrative where they got that from. She says, another time, not so long ago, when I lived down in Gary, I be walking down the railroad track soon in the morning, and before I knowed it, there was a white man walking alongside of me. I just thought it was somebody, but I wasn't sure, so I turned off at the first street to get away from there. The next morning, I be going to work at the same time. It was kind of foggy and dark, so I never seen nobody till I mighty nigh run into this same man. And there he goes, about half a step ahead of me, his two hands resting on his behind. So look, when the interviewer told this story, they made no allusion to the fact that she said she's seen this ghost more than once. They just made it seem like she made up a ghost story to allegorically refer to race relations in the 1930s. And then when she was walking one day, she was walking along the railroad tracks. She seen a white man who she thought was a ghost. And she tell the white man, oh, I'm just some old colored woman. You don't need to be walking next to me. And then he disappeared. But that's not the full story. The full story is the ancestor says she seen this ghost when she was walking to work one morning by the railroad tracks. And then the next morning, when she was doing her walk to work around the same time, she seen him again. And she goes on to say, I was so close up to him, I could see him plain as I see you. He had fingernails that long, all clean and polished. He was tall and had on a derby hat and stylish black clothes. When I walked slow, he slowed down. When I stopped, he stopped, never once looking round. Now, they edited out those details from that article because they wanted to trick you. They didn't tell you that she described the ghost. She described his fingernails. She described what he was wearing. She described how tall he was. She described his hat. They skipped over all of that because they wanted to fool you, family, because they never thought that you would read it for yourself. She say, my feet make a noise on Descendants between the rails, but he don't make a mighty noise. That was the first thing got me scared, but I figured I better find out for sure if and he be a spirit. So I say, go good and loud. Look at here, mister. I just an old colored woman and I know my place. And I wishing you wouldn't walk with me, counter what folks might say. He never looked around no more. If I wasn't there and I couldn't, and I cut my eyes round to see if there is somebody I can holler to for help. When I look back, he was gone like that without making a sound. So she's saying that when she seen this ghost the second time, right? She's really not sure if he's a spirit or not because she can see him just as plain as she can see the interviewer. She even described what he looked like. And so to check to see if he was a spirit, she spoke to him. And she said, look at here, mister. I was just an old colored woman and I knows my place. I wishing you wouldn't walk with me, counter what folk might say. But the spirit never said anything, didn't respond. So then when she looked around, the ghost disappeared. Now that's not what the article told us. The article butchered it. They butchered it up. She just tells us that the lady says, when I walk slow, he walks slow, and when I stop, he stopped, never once looking round. This transcript of Anderson's interview, rendered in dialect, reads, my feet make a noise on the cinders tween the rails, but he don't make a mite of noise. Anderson asked the man, who she declared to Frost to be a haunt, to go away by saying, look at here, mister, I just an old colored woman and I knows my place and I wish you wouldn't walk with me, counting what folks might say. The man went away as bidden. You see how they manipulate the story? Then she said, why would Anderson tell a visiting researcher a ghost story? Now, their explanation is that it was a means for a black interviewee to make an argument about the unwelcome presence of a white interviewer in her home and to point out the danger she perceived in his presence, all while preserving a mask of civility and giving the interviewer what he asked for. While Federal Writers Project interviewers like Frost were engaged in writing down African-American ghost stories, Stewart writes, former slaves such as Josephine Anderson were conjuring up tales about power and racial identity. This woman did not conjure up no tales about power and racial identity. She was asked about ghost stories, and so she told ghost stories. And this ghost story was not about the interviewer in her house. Lies, family. Lies. Lies. But they don't want you to understand the historical value of the slave narrative. Look what she said in the very next paragraph after. Look, I mean, in that same paragraph, look what she say, family. They want you to believe that it's a mythological account. They want you to believe that this is a mythological account about the interviewer in our house. But she says, then I knowed he be a haunt, and the next day when I tell somebody about it, they say he be the German what got killed at the crossing a spell back. And other folks has seen him just like I did. So she's not the only one that's seen that white man ghost, and they even identified him as being some German guy that got killed, the ghost of a German guy that got killed. And in the very next paragraph, look what she say. That ain't the only haunt I ever seen. So how is this mythological about power and racial identity in the 1930s? Lies, family. Lies. The slave narratives are historically reliable, and sometimes you're going to run across articles that's going to make you try to confuse you into believing that that's not true. But when you go back to the source, you see it's a lot of misquoting going on. So let's get into this part right here. The historical reliability of the ancestors' oral history known as slave narrative. I'm going to show you guys just how historically accurate that these slave narratives actually are. And you can validate a lot of what they're saying. So this is one of the slave narratives out of South Carolina. And this is the story of ancestor Lavinia Hayward, right? So it says Lavinia Hayward, a Negro woman, 67 years old, living at 515 Marion Street, Columbia, South Carolina, is a daughter of ex-slaves. Her parents were Peter Jones and Rachel Bryant Jones. They married in Columbia soon after they were freed in 1865. Lavinia reviews her mother's experience with a famous South Carolina family. We're going to look into that famous South Carolina family. Stay tuned. Before and after bondage, and takes a glance at Columbia's progress in the past half century. The ancestor says, "Show, I've been here 67 years in South Carolina, and I've seen a struggling town of 10,000 grow from poverty to the present great city and riches. Shucks, I specs if you was to set me down at Broad River Bridge and tell me to go home, I might get lost trying to find my way to where I lived for many years. During my time, I sure seen this city sad and glad, and I was happy to say that it seemed to be feeling a right smart like itself now. My mammy and her daddy and mammy was bought from the Bryants at Beaufort by the Rhett family, R-H-E-T-T. That's going to be the subject of our discussion today. Was bought from the Bryants at Beaufort by the Rhett family when my mammy was a little pickaninny. She not able to tell nothing about her experiences with the Bryants, but she sure recalled a lot of things after she joined the Reds. So we're going to see how historically accurate the things that she can recall about the Reds are. Remember, the ancestor is claiming that they were enslaved to the Red family. We're going to see if we can identify this Red family and if what she's telling us about them is historically accurate or not, or is she making stuff up? She lived with them till she was just turning 12 years old. Then she come to Columbia as a slave of Master John T. Rhett. He moved here as a refugee in 1862. Master Rhett was not healthy enough to go to the war, but some of his folks go. Now, obviously, that war that she's talking about is the Civil War. Look, one of Master Rhett's brothers, who was too old to go to the war, marched way to fight Yankees at Honey Hill. The Yankee fleet sent an army in boats to cut the Charleston and Savannah Railroad, and the Confederates meet them at Honey Hill, halfway between Beaufort and Savannah. Stop right there. Hold on. Help to revive our ancestors' reputation by imitating their commitment to truth. Teach your children to do the same. Speak truth. Already speak truth always, family. Thanks for tapping in, everybody that's in here. So now we're getting some history that we can either prove or disprove. Is the ancestor telling the truth or is the ancestor lying? The ancestor says that a Yankee fleet sent the army in boats to cut the Charleston and Savannah Railroad, and the Confederates meet them at Honey Hill, halfway between Beaufort and Savannah. So we're getting some very specific details about the Civil War, right? We're getting some very specific details about the Civil War. Now check this out. A quick Google search take you to Wikipedia will show you that the Battle of Honey Hill was a real Confederate battle. The historical reliability of the ancestors is validated. Look what Wikipedia say. The Battle of Honey Hill was the third battle of Sherman's march to the sea, fought November 30th, 1864 during the American Civil War. It did not involve Major General William T. Sherman's main force marching from Atlanta to Savannah, Georgia, but was a failed Union Army expedition under Brigadier General John P. Hatch that attempted to cut off the Charleston and Savannah Railroad in support of Sherman's projected arrival in Savannah. Why did I highlight that? Wikipedia is telling us that the Union Army attempted to cut off the Charleston and Savannah Railroad as part of what's historically known as the Battle of Honey Hill. And when we zoom into what the ancestor had to say about this, the ancestor already told us. The Yankee fleet sent an army in boats to cut the Charleston and Savannah Railroad, and the Confederates meet them at Honey Hill, halfway between Beaufort and Savannah. So the ancestor had already documented before Wikipedia existed, before the internet existed, before you could Google any of this. Back in 1937, the ancestor had already documented this history of the Battle of Honey Hill. She had already told you that the Yankees had came in boats to try to cut off the Charleston and Savannah Railroad. And then when you look into Wikipedia, family, you find the exact same story. It was a failed Union Army expedition under Brigadier General John P. Hatch that attempted to do what? Cut off the Charleston and Savannah Railroad in support of Sherman's projected arrival in Savannah. You see that, family? Wikipedia quotes what the oral history / slave narratives already taught us. So never let somebody try to convince you that the slave narratives or the oral history of our ancestors is invalid because they're utilizing some of this information on some of these websites that we're going to when they're looking back to see what was going on during slavery around the time of the Civil War. The historical narrative that our ancestors give about that time is just as valid as the Europeans' account of what was going on around that time. Look what the ancestor even said about it. In a bloody battle there, the Confederates won. I'm going to show y'all the next page in a second, but it's kind of cut off. But she says, in a bloody battle there, the Confederates won. Look what Wikipedia tells us. They tell us that it was a failed Union Army expedition. The Union Army is the Yankees. The Yankees lost. And when the ancestor says that it was a bloody battle, look at this, family. You got the United States or the Union on the left, and you got the Confederate States, the Confederacy on the right. So Union / Yankees on the left, Confederacy on the right. The Yankees, Brooklyn, hold on just a second. Brooklyn Zoo say Grand Rising King. Hey, Hotel, brother, we in the building. Hotel fam, thanks for tapping in. Hey, we back on this series of allowing the ancestors to speak. We letting the ancestors speak for themselves, and we validating the historicity in their historical accounts. So look, the Union Army is the Yankee Army. They had 5,000 troops at the Battle of Honey Hill. The Confederate Army had 1,400 troops at the battle. Now look at casualties and losses, right? The total number of casualties and losses on the Union side was 755. The total number on the Confederate side was only 50. 88 Union soldiers were killed, while only 8 Confederate soldiers were killed. And a whopping 623 Union soldiers were wounded, and only 42 on the Confederate side was wounded. And there were 44 Union soldiers captured and 0 Confederate soldiers captured, validating once again what the ancestor already told us. In a bloody battle there, the Confederates win, showing again the historical accuracy of the slave narrative. And so this right here, I just wanted to include a diagram that they have from 1864 showing the battle plans of the battle at Honey Hill. Look, the map shows the Confederate earthworks as well as the location of Union forces at Honey Hill, New Grahamville in Jasper County, South Carolina. Sherman sent 5,500 Union troops under J.G. Foster inland to secure a foothold on the Charleston and Savannah Railroad. They were met by 1,400 Confederates heavily entrenched and forced to withdraw. I'm going to zoom in on some of this just so y'all can see what the battle looked like. You see in the bottom left hand corner, it's telling you that the Union forces are in blue and the rebel forces are in red. Okay, and you see plan of the battle at Honey Hill, South Carolina, November 30th, 1864. So you guys can see how the Union Army was set up, they're in blue, and how the Confederate soldiers were set up, they're in red. And they were totally outmanned and outgunned, but the Confederates, they kicked butt that day. And it's just going to show the historical accuracy of the slave narratives that told us about this. All right, an actual historical battle that the ancestors had already mentioned. So look at the bottom of it. We're going to start back at the bottom, that last sentence. She says, in a bloody battle there, the Confederates won. Exactly. Master Ritt of Beaufort was wounded there, and his brother John leave Columbia and go there to see him while he was in bed battling for life. So we saw that it was a few of the Confederates that were wounded, and she's mentioning that one of the individuals that she knew personally was one of those ones wounded. Let's continue. She says, my mammy never worked in the field at Beaufort, nor after she come to Columbia. She was kept on duty in the big house and learned to sew and make garments, quilts, and things. She also learned to read, write, and cipher, and she could sing many of the church songs of them days. She played with the white children that come to see the Reds in Beaufort and in Columbia. She tell me about things in Beaufort where the Reds lived then. She say the Reds has been Bukra since the time, and I believe that's like white people, especially a white man, that term Bukra. But she say the Reds has been Bukra since the time when Colonel William Red go out in his battleships to chase and kill pirates in the days when Carolina was ruled by the King of England. Stop. This is another piece of history that we can either prove or disprove. Is the ancestor lying, or is the ancestor telling the truth? Now, mind you, the United States wasn't formed until 1776, quote unquote Independence Day, right? July 4th, 1776. We all understand that before that, there were 13 colonies. These 13 colonies were ruled over by European powers. Okay, so she's saying that this Red family that her family belonged to have been in that area since Colonel William Red went out in his battleships to chase and kill pirates. And she's saying, she's giving us a date that we can pinpoint in history. She's saying that this was in the days when Carolina was ruled by the King of England. So she's pointing us back to a time when there was still the 13 colonies. So can we find in history a Colonel William Red who was in the Carolinas on a battleship chasing and killing pirates before America was America and when this area was still the 13 colonies? Is the ancestor telling the truth? I present to you Colonel William Red that she just told us about. Look at this, family. Colonel William Red, born September 4th, 1666, and died January 12th, 1723. Now pay attention to those dates. Remember, quote unquote Independence Day is what? July 4th, 1776. So this guy would have definitely lived when the Carolinas was still under colonial rule. But did he ever go out on a battle on a ship? And did he ever fight pirates? Or is this just some mythological tale to talk about race relations in the 1930s? She says that, well, not she says, but the historical record tells us that Colonel William Red was an English-born planter. English-born planter, politician, and military officer who immigrated to the Carolinas, where he spent the majority of his life. Born in London, Red immigrated to North America in 1694, accompanied by his wife Sarah. He gradually acquired ownership over several slave plantations which specialized in producing rice. Red also sat in the South Carolina General Assembly and served in the colonial militia. In 1718, he commanded 2 chartered sloops and defeated the Barbadian pirate Stede Bonnet in the Battle of Cape Fear River. So we have in the historical record the actual man, Colonel William Red, who immigrated to the Americas from England, right? Acquired slave plantations, instituted a system of got into the system of slavery, owned slaves in South Carolina, and this guy was actually in the militia, went out on boats, and not only fought but defeated the Barbadian pirate named Stede Bonnet. So was the ancestor telling the truth? You know the ancestor was telling the truth. You know the ancestor. Once again, the ancestor is valid. She say the Reds has been Bukra since the time when Colonel William, when she's quoting her mother. The ancestor's mother told her that the Reds has been Bucra since the time when Colonel William Rhett go out in his battleships to chase and kill pirates in the days when Carolina was ruled by the King of England. Now, before there was a hold on, family. Give me just 1 second. Give me just 1 second. All right, sorry about that. Sorry about that. My son was giving me a phone call. Let's get back into this. Uh, where were we? Again, sorry about that. But you gotta take care of the children. When the children call, you gotta answer. But anyway, so before there was a Google, before there was an internet, before there was anything like that. Oh, hold on, pause. I like to read the comments because I love when y'all engage, man. Matthew Daniels TV is live right now. Definitely Black Wolf. We going in, man. Allowing the ancestors to speak. We're going to be doing this for a while. And we proving the historical validity of the stuff that they told us. So check this out. Before there was a Google, before there was an internet, I'm pretty sure before some of these historical books were written that we have now, the ancestor already told us that during colonial times, a man named Colonel William Rhett immigrated to America, and he was riding on battleships, he was killing pirates, and he was in the Carolinas when they was ruled by the King of England. Facts over fiction. Listen, never let somebody tell you that there is not historical reliability to the slave narrative. Now, everything that we read in the slave narrative, we may not be able to actually pull up online because everything isn't documented, but I'm showing you that we can trust what they have to say. Because when it comes to stuff that we can't actually go back and verify, we're finding out that the ancestors was telling the truth. Look, she say, definitely Bigfoot, definitely kids come first, man. You already know, family. Look, she say they own many big plantations in Beaufort County and raise big crops of rice and Sea Island cotton, right? Big crops of rice and Sea Island cotton. And what it the quote unquote modern day historical thing tells us, he gradually acquired ownership over several slave plantations which specialized in producing rice. Okay, that's the modern explanation about him. But the ancestors had already told us that they owned many big plantations in Beaufort County and raised big crops of rice and Sea Island cotton. So far, everything is checking out. She say the Sea Island cotton was so costly that it was handpicked by slaves and placed in 100-pound sacks. Then it was shipped to France and the growers reap a rich harvest. So, what is this Sea Island cotton that the ancestors are speaking about? Has she veered off into mythology now? Is that what happened? Hold on just a second. I got something for y'all. You gonna like this. Like I say, we're gonna be validating every single aspect of these slave narratives. Give me just a second to share my screen. All right. There we go. Let me just give me a second to make sure I still got the audio on with the screen share, because sometimes you don't have it. Bam. It's there. Now check this out. Now, I never heard of specific Sea Island cotton before this. I never heard of Colonel William Rhett before this. Do you understand what I'm telling you guys? Like I looked into this stuff because I read it in the slave narrative, right? Because I was, I like to read, I like to fact check, I like to research. So this is like all new information that came to me because I trusted the slave narrative. So look at this: the history of Sea Island cotton. In the 18th century, cotton truly was king in Beaufort. Now remember, Beaufort and Columbia is what the ancestor is continuously talking about. Check this out. Sea Island cotton, a strain of cotton unique to the Low Country, served as a lucrative crop for local planters like the Elliott, Fripp, Barnwell, Hayward, Pope, and Jenkins families. After the Revolutionary War, the British market for indigo disappeared, so planters needed a new product to grow on local plantations. The silky and highly prized Sea Island cotton boasted extra long fibers that made the variety particularly desirable, right? I don't want to read the whole article. Let's go to this. Grown right here. Grown on the Sea Islands of South Carolina and Georgia, this strain of cotton served as an important part of the Beaufort economy. Remember, the Red family that she's talking about is in South Carolina, and she keeps referencing Beaufort and Columbia. And she even mentioned the Sea Island cotton. Now we see that that is historically accurate. She goes on to say that Beaufort became the wealthiest and most cultured town of its size in America because of the Sea Island cotton crop. I'm going to read that again. Beaufort became the wealthiest and most cultured town of its size in America because of the Sea Island crop. Y'all see that? Yeah, come on, man. Do y'all see that? Now check this out. Let's go back to what the ancestor was telling us. Let's go back to what the ancestor was trying to tell us. And it is the ancestor historically accurate? Yet again, she says, the Sea Island cotton was so costly that it was handpicked by slaves and placed in 100-pound sacks. Then it was shipped to France and the growers reap a rich harvest. Now, this is important as well because this is part of how the Red family got so powerful in South Carolina and got so rich in South Carolina from slavery. They owned many plantations and they had their hands in the Sea Island cotton, which we just learned made Beaufort one of the wealthiest places of its size in the Americas. So again, the ancestor is giving us accurate history. She says, Mammy tells us children that the Reds sure was the big folks of South Carolina. And I reckon that's so because the books, swords, guns, windlasses, and things like that in a room at the John T. Rhett home show what they has been doing for several hundred years. Now that's accurate because this interview was taken in 1937, but we can go all the way back to the 1600s when Colonel William Rhett was born and immigrated over here to the Americas, right? And they definitely were some of the big folks in South Carolina. I mean, if you was to Google, just Google Colonel William Rhett right now, and you're going to see that his home and several of his other family homes, they're national landmarks right now today. His home, Colonel William Rhett, the dude that fought the pirates, the dude that immigrated over here, the dude with the several plantations in South Carolina, his home is a national landmark right now today. So even when the ancestor said that they was like big folks or they was a big deal in South Carolina, she not lying. Look at this. Oh yes, you want to know whereabouts John T. Rhett lived in Columbia? He lived at the house number 420 Washington Street. Now check this out. She's so accurate with the history. She's giving you locations. She's dropping location. Now, John T. Rhett was a descendant of Colonel William Rhett. And she's saying, yeah, he lived in Columbia at 1420 Washington Street, right across the street from where the personage is of the Washington Street Methodist Church now stands. I go there with Mammy often and play round the yard. Mammy always worked there as long as she able to serve a tall. She makes sick and die in 1883. Again, we can validate. Hold on. What did they mean? What did they mean? I can't really see the whole comment. What did they mean by low country? I don't know. What did they say that again? I don't remember exactly what slide you seen it on. Was that the one about the sea salt? I mean the sea island cotton. If that was about the sea island cotton, hold on, let me go back. Let me go back to it. I got you. Hold on, just a second. Let me get in here. Give me just a second. I think you're talking about that web page about the Sea Island cotton. Let me see, low country. I want to see exactly where we got that from. So, was it on? Okay. I get what you're saying. What they talking about? Yeah, it was right here. The Sea Island cotton, a strain of cotton unique to the low country. Look, check this out. You wasn't able to get it everywhere. Okay, you couldn't get it everywhere. So that was one of the reasons that made it so valuable. I'm gonna see if I can find this another article that I saw on it. It was like showing, it gave like some maps to where you could actually find it at. I didn't keep that one queued up. My bad. But it's basically just talking about an area in the Americas where you could actually grow the Sea Island cotton at. You couldn't grow it everywhere, and they didn't let everybody know how to actually grow it and where you could get it from, just so they could basically like control the money flow, basically, tell you the truth. Let me see. Was this it? Yeah. So basically, they talk about this general area right here. Basically, you see how it's right here next to South Carolina. It's like a system of islands around this area that's off into the water and around like the borders of the actual quote unquote state where they grew this particular cotton at. You couldn't grow. It wasn't grown all over the Americas, and it was not grown on every specific plantation. So it was like in the areas where it was able to be grown, it just so happens that particular cotton came into like high demand. And so when it came into high demand, they were able to charge exorbitant prices of it, and they were able to ship it overseas to like Britain, places in England, France. They were able to ship it to different European countries because the style of material that they wanted to use, they wanted to make their clothes and things out of that Sea Island cotton because it was like a finer, silkier material that it could make. And so when they talking about from the low country, they just identifying that as opposed to anywhere, because you couldn't grow the Sea Island cotton just anywhere you wanted to. It was only able to be grown in certain locations. So check this out. So she's mentioning that the John T. Rhett house was across the street from the Washington Street Methodist Church. Now, that Washington Street Methodist Church that she's talking about, it still stands right now to this day. I Googled it, and that Washington Street Methodist Church that she's talking about is definitely historically accurate because it's still there right now today. Now look, check this out. She goes on to say, Master John T. Rhett was mayor of the city 3 times in 1882, 1884, and in 1886. So now we have another piece of history that we can double check. Either she's telling the truth or she's lying. She's saying that one of the descendants of this Colonel William Rhett was a man named Master John T. Rhett, and he was the mayor of the city 3 different times, and she gives the years: 1882, 1884, and 1886. So is there any historical relevance to what she just said? Can that be proven? Can that be proven? Let's find out. Let's find out if that can be proven. So we're going to go back. Let's do another screen share. Let's get that off the screen. Let's go back in here. I got that pulled up for y'all as well. Okay, give it just a second. All right, so bam. So check this out. We're proving the historical reliability of the slave narrative. So she tells us that this man was mayor 3 times, and she gives us the years. So now we're on the page, and this is the City of Columbia, Office of the Mayor page. And they're listing the intendants and mayors of Columbia, South Carolina. Now look, if we go down to number 48, we see John T. Rhett, 1882 to 1890. So there was a mayor of Columbia, South Carolina, named John T. Rhett, who was the mayor from 1882 to 1890. And he was the mayor for that amount of years because he won the mayor's seat 3 times. So again, before there was any type of Google, the internet, or anything like that, the ancestor had already put this down into the historical record for us to look at. She says Master John T. Rhett was mayor of the city 3 times, in 1882, 1884, and in 1886. She says, I knows well because he see to it that us children go to school long about then, and not a one of us has been unable to read, write, and cipher since. Now, when they're talking about cipher, they're talking about just like to decipher things or to be able to translate things or understand what you're reading. Okay? Understand what you're reading. So now she has even pointed out a mayor who's a descendant of the Rhett family, this slave owner, right, who immigrated from overseas. She identified him and she told us the years that he was a mayor. And again, we're talking about the historical reliability of the ancestors' oral history known as the slave narratives. Okay, so look, she goes on to say, you asked if I knows R. Goodwin Rhett of Charleston. So the interviewer is asking her about another Rhett, another descendant of this Colonel William Rhett. And she asks her specifically, do you know R. Goodwin Rhett of Charleston? And she says, I sure does. I has talked with him and he asked me many questions. So she specifically talked to this guy. She says he was born in Columbia, but moved to Charleston many years ago. And like the Bukra that he is, he climbed to the top as the mayor of Charleston, big banker and president of the Chamber of Commerce of the United States. So she gives us a lot more historical background to this guy. So she's saying that there's a man named R. Goodwin Rhett, who was also the mayor of Charleston. He was a big banker and he was president of the Chamber of Commerce of the United States. Now, those are some really big claims, right? Those are some really big claims. So again, we're going to ask ourselves, can we validate the information that we are being given? Are the slave narratives historically accurate? Because you're going to come across individuals online writing articles and whatnot that's going to try to invalidate what our ancestors had to say. So here we have R. Goodwin Rhett. Just like the ancestor told us, Robert Goodwin Rhett, 1862 to 1939, was the 50th mayor of Charleston, South Carolina, completing 2 terms from 1903 to 1911. From 1916 to 1918, he served as president of the Chamber of Commerce of the United States. Isn't that exactly what the ancestor just told us? That he served as the president of the Chamber of Commerce of the United States? I swear to y'all, on some level, I think some of this information, it's probably documented somewhere, but some of this information could be coming directly from the slave narrative. They got to be this is where I got this information from. I had no clue that an R. Goodwin Rhett existed until I read it in the slave narrative. And then that made me do other research to try to follow up on what they were saying. And lo and behold, this is what I find. Truth after truth after truth after truth after truth. So can the slave narratives or the oral history of our ancestors be trusted? Man, you be the judge. You be the judge. I'm showing you step by step that everything this woman said checks out. Everything this woman said checks out. She say, so you see, my mammy was lucky in living with such a fine family. And she goes on to say, you ask if my man, her husband, has come down from the Haywood family of the Combahee River slaves. No, he come from the north, and he say there was Haywoods up there, both white and black. So let's finish up with that. I think we've proven that the historical account of the ancestors in that regard can definitely be verified and believed. It's historically accurate. So let's look into some more descendants of this Colonel William Rhett. Because if African Americans alive today have ancestors who were enslaved, right? If they have ancestors who were enslaved, then the slave owners, they have to have ancestors as well. So who are the descendants of the slave owners? That's the question that we got to ask. Look at this, family. We got one right here. Alicia Rhett. Notice the last name, but just because you got the last name don't mean you're a descendant. But Alicia Rhett. Mary Alicia Rhett, born February 1st, 1915, died January 3rd, 2014, was an American actress and portrait painter who is best remembered for her role as India Wilkes in the 1939 epic film Gone with the Wind. At the time of her death, Rhett was one of the oldest surviving credited cast members of the movie. So here's a descendant of Colonel William Rhett, who just passed away in 2014, and she was actually in the film Gone with the Wind. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but in the book Gone with the Wind, the author, a lady named Margaret Mitchell, she created a character in that book named Rhett Butler. And she specifically named the character Rhett Butler because she wanted to tie it to 2 powerful names from colonial times. And so the Rhett in the book, the Rhett Butler in the book, that name Rhett comes from Colonel William Rhett that I just showed you guys earlier on in this video. And Alicia Rhett is one of his direct descendants. Check this out. In a newspaper article about Alicia Rhett, it said, Alicia Rhett has noted family line. The following article on Miss Alicia Rhett was issued by Selznick Pictures, now making Gone with the Wind, in which Miss Rhett has a role. Since earliest colonial days, the Rhett family has occupied a prominent position in the South generally, and more particularly in and around Charleston, South Carolina. Thus, it came about that Miss Margaret Mitchell, the one who wrote Gone with the Wind, named her principal fictional male character Rhett Butler, combining the names of 2 old families. So the book the story Gone with the Wind, written by Margaret Mitchell, its principal fictional male character is named Rhett Butler after Colonel William Rhett. But it was pure coincidence that brought about the signing of Alicia Rhett for the role of India Wilkes in David O. Selznick's Technicolor production of Gone with the Wind. Now, Alicia Rhett was a descendant of William Rhett, but they didn't know this when they initially cast her for the role. It just kind of happened. But look what they go on to say. They say, let's scroll down a little bit. Let's go to right here. To this difficult characterization, Alicia Rhett brings a sound background of training in the finest Southern tradition. The first Rhett to settle in the New World was Colonel William Rhett, who established his home in Charleston in 1760. Robert Barnwell Rhett, Alicia's great-grandfather, was known as the father of secession for his outspoken policies while serving as United States Senator. The Barnwells also are a famous Southern family. So hold on. How is Alicia Rhett related to Colonel William Rhett? Well, her grandfather is a man named Robert Barnwell Rhett, another descendant of Colonel William Rhett. And this guy he's actually known as the father of secession. When you look into this family tree, you're going to see that a lot of this guy's ancestors held prominent positions throughout South Carolina and in various parts of the South. And they are a very influential family. Why? Because they made so much money during slavery, and their arms and their hands extended so far that they have their hands tied in so much. There's so much money. There's so much power and prestige in that name in South Carolina that this woman who was in Gone with the Wind, Alicia Rhett, her grandfather was Robert Barnwell Rhett. And what is he known for? He's known as the father of secession. Goddamn slaveholders. Goddamn slaveholders, man. Check this out. Robert Barnwell Rhett. Here he is, live and direct. Look, he was an American politician who served as a deputy from South Carolina to the Provisional Confederate States Congress from 1861 to 1862. They say, as a staunch supporter of slavery and an early advocate of secession, he was a fire eater nicknamed the father of secession. Now, a fire eater, that term basically means someone that full-heartedly supported slavery. Why? Because since his family got on these shores, since the Rhett family got on these shores, they were slaveholders. Not just the colonel. They were generational slaveholders. And they had plantations all over. And even when the Civil War kicked off, you had several members of the Rhett dynasty, fighting for the Confederacy and trying to keep slavery going. So, and it was so impactful that a descendant of Colonel William Rhett is known as the father of secession. He pushed it hard, very hard. But look, check this out. This was one of the quotes he's known for saying. See if I can. Well, I can't highlight it. Oh, hold on. Sorry about that. He says, a people owning slaves are mad, or worse than mad, who do not hold their destinies in their own hands. Basically, trying to advocate for the South and South Carolina seceding from the Union, because he was very pro-slavery. They go on to say that, look, in 1838, this guy right here, he changed his last name from Smith to that of a prominent colonial ancestor, Colonel William Rhett. He was born Robert Barnwell Smith. Now, he was a descendant of Rhett, but sometimes through marriages and things like that, last names can change, and you can still share bloodline. So he was born Robert Barnwell Smith, but he changed his name to Rhett because he wanted to be directly tied to his colonial ancestors' slave-holding past. You understand what I'm saying? They're very proud of this slave-holding name, this slave-holding Rhett name. You see? And he was the grandfather of this woman right here, Alicia Rhett. Let's go a little further, family. Check out this page right here. Now, there is a American artist named William Means Rhett. Now, this guy is a descendant of Colonel William Rhett as well. And he's some kind of painter. He does all paintings and stuff like that. And when I was doing my research for this, I was looking up some of the pieces that he created. And look what I came across. Look what I came across. Now, this is some of the artwork by a descendant of Colonel William Rhett. Now, this piece is known as Bust of a Surprised African-American Young Boy. And it was created around 1980 or 1981. Now, I was born in 1982. So this wasn't created that long ago, right? And the William Means Rhett, who is the descendant of Colonel William Rhett, this one was born in 1948. Now, tell me this. Why would a descendant of a slave owner and who has multiple slave owners in his genealogical background, also in his genealogical background, he has a man that's known as the father of secession. Why would he be making artwork like this? Bust of a surprised African-American young boy? I mean, don't this look kind of weird to you, family? Don't this look kind of weird to you? Coming from the descendant of a slave owner? Now, I don't know what was going on in his mind. I can't get into his mind, and I can't tell you why he made these particular pieces of art. But look at this. Look at it from a front view, and look at this other quote-unquote art piece that he made that's next to it. Now, it's kind of blurry because I got these images offline, and this was the best image I could get. It was nothing any less blurred I looked. But this one that's standing up, the real dark one, the lips almost look red, right? They almost look red, as in those caricatures that they made of African Americans back in the days. You see? Almost looks red. And I wouldn't be surprised if this William Rhett, the descendant of Colonel William Rhett, wasn't playing some kind of game. And now this art piece was something that this guy was selling at an auction. They auctioned this off. Now look, that it was estimated to be $1,200 or $1,800 USD. And it appears to have been sold. So somebody bought this at an auction off William Means Rhett for $1,200 to $1,800. It looks extremely funny to me, family. Extremely funny to me. But what we're gonna do, we're gonna go into one more ancestor of the guy William Rhett. We're gonna go into one more ancestor of this colonial guy William Rhett. Let me see. Give me just a second, family. Give me just a second. Now this guy, he's actually alive right now today. He's still alive. They're still alive. These Rhetts, they're still around. I don't know about how they feel about everything, how they feel about their history and whatnot. But it's not for me to decide. But in my research, I came across this. Another artist. There's a quote unquote a lot of artists in this family now. Artist profile William M. Rhett III. The guy from the thumbnail. Look, his name is William M. Rhett III. He's part of an amazingly talented, creative, and business-savvy family with deep roots in Beaufort. Truth be told, he is actually the 10th William Rhett since his family first landed in the New World in 1694. The first, Colonel William Rhett, arrived from London to settle right here in the Low Country. That goes back to what I was asked earlier. When they're talking about the Low Country, that's just the area on the map in America. where they came to from London in South Carolina. That is Low Country right there, them shores. So they say Colonel Rhett is credited with capturing the pirate Stede Bonnet, also known as the Gentleman Pirate. His mother, Nancy Ricker Rhett, can trace her colonial roots all the way back to 1666 and Dr. Henry Woodward, the first British colonist. So this guy is indeed a direct descendant of the Colonel William Rhett, who came here during colonial times. And now, in line with what this is all about, when I'm talking about the descendants of slave owners and the historical reliability of the slave narratives, what you're going to see, hold on just a second. Exactly. It reminds you of the blackface characters. Exactly. Now, what is a descendant of slave owners? Like, not just one, it's not just one slave owner. This family, that is their history. That's how they made their mark. That's how they became famous in South Carolina. That's how they made their money. They have a rich history of owning slaves and supporting slavery. So what is this guy doing making those and auctioning them off? Get out of here. But like what I say with this guy, William M. Rhett III, the descendants, no, that's what I was saying. Sorry about that. So with these slave narratives, what I'm trying to point out is I had to do it with one. I had to pick out one of the specific slave narratives and take you guys through the whole walk. But if you look into different slave narratives from different states, they give you pieces of information to where you can track down living descendants of the slave owners right now today, because they give you names, they give you dates, they give you locations. In the same way, see this guy, I found him specifically by reading the slave narratives. Once I read the slave narratives, that gave me enough information to actually know what I was looking for, and to actually start doing the research. But like I say, if you look it up, let me see. Matter of fact, I want to show y'all something. These people are they're still famous to this day. They're famous to this day, right? Look, here's his house right here. The Colonel William Rhett House is a historic stucco brick 2-story home at 54 Hazel Street, Charleston, South Carolina. A historical marker was erected at the house in 2001 by the Preservation Society of Charleston. And I don't mind preserving history. I love history, so that's not what I'm talking about. I'm just sharing some stuff with you guys. Look, the Colonel William Rhett, I'm right here under history. The Colonel William Rhett House was built in 1712 as the main house for Point Plantation, later known as Rhettsbury, lying outside the city walls. So the William Rhett House, the colonial slave owner, his house still stands. Like, they're a big deal in South Carolina. The family is a big deal in South Carolina, man. You know, and they have so many descendants right now today. Like this guy, this artist, and his son. He has a son that's named William M. Rhett as well. They're keeping their legacy alive, which I'm not mad at them. I talk about my ancestors. I love my ancestors. In my particular family, I can go back to 1848 on my father's side, you know, to one of my ancestors that was enslaved in Alabama. And on my mother's side, through various mothers and fathers, I can go all the way back to one of my ancestors that was brought directly from Africa. You know, you got to do the genealogical research, look at some of the census records. And, you know, it's a task, but you can find some of your ancestors. But I want you to know that, yes, there are descendants of slaves in this country. And as descendants of slaves, we can look to our ancestors. But there's also descendants of slave owners as well. And you can utilize the oral history of our ancestors, quote unquote, the slave narratives, to track down some of these slave owners, man. Yeah, they're so historically accurate that you can use it to track them down. And I'm not 100% sure, but this article right here that was attempting to discredit the slave narratives, I don't know why an individual would do that, but it's possible that an individual will want to discredit the oral histories of the slave narratives because they're ashamed of what we may find out. They may be ashamed of what we may find out. Like, I don't know if y'all caught it, but when I was reading through those slave narratives about the Reds, even the John T. Rhett, who was a mayor after slavery ended, the ancestor who was born after slavery referred to him as Master John T. Rhett. She still called him Master, right? Matter of fact, I'm gonna show y'all this, and then we're gonna get out of here. Because I want you to think about this. Look. Let me see. Now, this Negro woman was born, she's 67 years old, right? We see it right there on the screen. She's 67 years old. Now, this interview was in 1937. So that would mean she was born in 1870. 1870 is after the Civil War. She is a daughter of ex-slaves, meaning she was born in quote unquote freedom. She was born quote unquote free. So when you read her slave narrative and you see things like look, I don't know if you see the hand right here. Master Rhett was not healthy enough to go to the war, but some of his folks go. Master Rhett? You still using the language, huh? Look, one of Master Rhett's brothers, still using that language. Master Rhett. Okay, hey, no big deal. Look at this last paragraph. Master John T. Rhett was mayor of the city 3 times in 1882 after slavery, 1884 after slavery, and in 1886 after slavery. But he's Master John T. Rhett. So what you got to understand is even after slavery ended, they still wanted to maintain their titles of being master over somebody. You see that? They still wanted to maintain their title of being master over somebody. You understand what I'm trying to tell you? So, let's do it like this. So the descendants of slave owners and the historical reliability of the slave narratives the ancestors speak. I want y'all to understand that when you are reading through these slave narratives, or when you're watching these videos where I'm reading through these slave narratives, you can bank on the information that's being told. Now, when you're doing this research, you may come across people, or you may see comments in the comment section where they would try to discredit what our ancestors were saying, but I just took you through step by step through the historical accuracy and reliability of one of the slave narratives. And I was able to prove it so historically accurate that I could find the living descendants of a slave owner that came here as an immigrant during colonial times. So based on the slave narratives, we got an accurate account of history from colonial times up into her time. And I was able to springboard off of that and show you guys real live descendants of slave owners right now today. You understand what I'm saying? And I was even able to show you that the person that wrote Gone with the Wind, when she wrote Gone with the Wind, she was paying homage to this guy, Colonel William Rhett, the slave owner. She was paying homage to him. And even in the movie of Gone with the Wind, one of his descendants was in there. When the Confederate War was going on, descendants of this man was fighting in the Civil War. right? To keep slavery going. One of his descendants was known as the father of secession. So what else can we find inside of the slave narratives? And will someone try to discredit the slave narratives because they are ashamed of what we might find? Now, when we read over the slave narratives that I just showed you pertaining to Colonel William Rhett, the lady giving the information, she was actually born after slavery. So she was just giving us history about that family that she got from her mother. But if we were able to get records from some people that was actually enslaved to them, what would we find? What would be the stories that we would hear about how they punished their slaves? Did they ever beat them? Did they ever starve them? Did they ever kill them? It's stories about slaves being killed for literally nothing, having dogs sicked on them, being beat, having their mothers ripped, having babies ripped from their mother's arms and sold on the auction blocks. Stories of slave owners having children with their slaves and selling the children off and totally disregarding them. Some horror stories when you read through some of these slave narratives. And then what if you read some of those horrors and you can actually pinpoint somebody that's alive today and be like, whoa, that's your ancestor right there. That's your ancestor that was doing that. So they may want to discredit the slave narratives to hide the sins of their family members. So I hope, as always, I hope you guys heard something that you never heard before. I hope you guys appreciated the show. I'm gonna keep doing this. Hold on. Did you say outside the city walls to that city had a wall around it? Yeah. See what she was talking about in that particular slave narrative, fam, is she went all the way back to colonial times. So some of the history that she was talking about was during colonial times, during slavery times, and during the Civil War times. So that particular city was kind of like built and rebuilt and built up over several hundred years. So everything that we see in some of these cities, it did not always look like that. And when in our minds, when we think back to like colonial times, these colonies weren't really connected like they are with the United States. That's why they were 13 different colonies. They were ruled by different monarchs and they were ruled by different European powers. Even the Carolinas. When they're talking about the Carolinas, that the name Carolina comes from King Charles. You had a King Charles I and you had a King Charles II. Now, the Latin word for Charles is like Carolus or something like that. I have to look it up exactly, but the Latin word for Charles is where they get the word Carolina from. They named it after a guy named King Charles. An interesting fact, King Charles III, that's the monarch in Britain right now today, who took the throne after his mother passed recently. He's King Charles III because back during colonial times, there was a King Charles, well, not because, but he's the third because there were two King Charles before him. King Charles II and King Charles I. King Charles I is who the Carolinas actually get their name from. So around certain areas, yes, there were walls built up. Also, all of the 13 colonies, they didn't always get along. A lot of them had beef with each other. Then during the Civil War, they had beef with the North. They had beef with some of their own colonial powers. They had beef with quote unquote pirates. That pirate that they talked about, that was a regular European. He went from being a landowner and having a name and having money to being a pirate. Well, basically, he was just attacking people at sea. So, yes, at certain points in certain locations, there were fortified defenses around some of these areas that we're talking about when we're looking into South Carolina, because that area transformed over the centuries. It went from being one thing to another thing to another thing to another thing. You understand what I'm saying? So yeah, it was definitely some fortified fortified areas. It wasn't always sweet. So I hope you guys learned something. I really appreciate y'all tapping in. And like I say, man, we letting the ancestors speak. And what I'm going to do as well, just be on the lookout for this. I'm going to do something on letting the ancestors speak where they're talking about ghosts and haunts. Because I really didn't like how that article tried to make it appear that the ancestor was talking about ghosts as some type of allegorical story to represent power and racial identity and racial bias in the 1930s. Hell no. They believed, right, that they saw ghosts. It's a lot of them talk about they all saw ghosts. They all saw spirits. They all talked about it. So that's foolishness what that article said. So if you get some time, check that out. Hey, if you haven't hit that like button, hit that like button. If you haven't subscribed, hit that subscribe button and follow me on this journey where we do this this series of allowing the ancestors to speak. This is Matthew Daniels TV. I'm your brother, Matthew Daniels. I reloaded. Hey, a good book in the hand of the right person can either be a weapon of mass destruction or a weapon of mass destruction. I mean, I messed it up. Let me do it again. Hold on. I reloaded. A good book in the hand of a good person can be a weapon of mass destruction or a weapon of mass production. You can either tear something down or build things up. This is your brother Matthew Daniels, aka the real bookworm. I'm doing the book game like it ain't never been done before, and I'm doing the book game like it'll probably never be done again. May your name live on forever, and may your memory never die. Let's make intelligence great again, family. Read a book.